Hello, everybody. I am really excited today because normally I don't do a ton of interviews, but when I do, I always make sure it's something I'm extremely interested in and passionate about. And today I have the fortune and honor to talk with Dr. Barrie Sands. And thank you, Dr. Sands, for being here today and chatting with me. How are you today?
Oh, I'm feeling great. It's a beautiful day, a little cloudy in San Diego right now, but the sun's going to come out after the marine layer is burnt off, and it's just going to be a beautiful day.
Love it. Yeah, same here in Colorado. It's very sunny as usual, and I love it because we've had a lot of storms lately.
Nice.
Yeah. So today, the focus of today's conversation is going to be around the heart consciousness or heart intelligence. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about you and just some basic background. How did you get into veterinary medicine? I know that's a fun question, but I like kind of starting there because it'll make sense.
Yeah, well, it was a very roundabout way that I got into veterinary medicine. Honestly, it all started with my love of dolphins. I had this great affinity for dolphins as a young child, and at ages of 5, 7. I mean, to me, they were mystical creatures. And I have always been very fascinated with the dream realm because I was always a very lucid dreamer. And I somehow wanted to study dolphins and learn about dolphin dreams and dolphin consciousness.
Yeah.
And I started doing some research with, or reading about a scientist named John Lilly, who back in the 70s, was working with consciousness in dolphins. And I was like, oh my God, I want to, do that, And so growing up in Brooklyn, New York, there wasn't many dolphins around. It wasn't like there was a Sea World or anything. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to get in touch with dolphins if living in the city? And as I got older, I was like, okay, well, I could just go to school and be a neurologist, and then I could study dolphin dreams. So I became like a biochemistry major and, worked in labs that studied brain research and neurology. And then when I applied for all my neurology residencies or PhD programs, I did not get accepted into any of them. I only applied to 3, and it was very hard, competitive. I just, wasn't for them. And so I was like, okay, well, now what do I do? How do I work with dolphins? I was like, well, I guess I'll become a veterinarian because veterinarians can work with dolphins.
Yeah.
and then I'll get a PhD in neurology after that, And so then I just ended up in vet school. It was my college graduation where that's when I decided to be a veterinarian and then go on that path. I always had this affinity for animals, loving animals, wanting to save the world and save animals, growing up and so it just fit. And then, it's been a 35-year journey, of being a veterinarian and going through an internship practice and then ending up at a specialty hospital doing emergency critical care. And then I wanted to circle back to my, sort of holistic dolphin things.
Yeah.
Which always led me back to consciousness and energy work, because dolphins are very ethereal creatures. And so the more I feel like I've come almost full circle with that, because about 20 some odd years ago, I delved into integrative holistic healthcare, working in the ER. And then that sort of brought me into wanting to heal things on a different level. And so I became certified in acupuncture, doing Chinese medicine. And then that naturally just leads you to herbs and plant medicine and food therapy. And then that opens the door to all these other things out there, all these other modalities,
Yes.
like homeopathy. And then homeopathy leads you to energy medicine, right? Because it's an energetic therapy, right? And then that led me back to light therapy and sound therapy and all the things you can't see anymore. And then that led me back to my dream state and consciousness and dolphins. So
It's funny how it goes in a cycle like that. And, speaking to that holistic kind of concept. It's like you start with one thing and then it just opens up another world for you, because you realize if it's truly holistic, you got to address a lot of different things, and you can do it in a number of ways. And I love that. You mentioned the ER clinic. How did you get involved in the ER clinics? Because, and I'll just be totally honest. I will come at this from a very like kind of caveman level. But like, I think when you think about being with animals and with veterinarians in the ER, you're seeing people at their most stressful time. And it's so chaotic. And I've been in these situations recently. I had lost a pet, and gosh, I got to imagine you had some kind of pull to that, because that takes a special person to want to do that. It's one thing to run a practice, but to be in the ER where you're seeing people in these like chaotic states.
Yeah. Well, originally what drove me to ER was that I had such a fascination in how the body works and the really deep nitty-gritty of things. And when I finished my veterinary school internship, I was really torn about, I wanted to specialize in something, but I was torn between the aspects of surgery and medicine, and they both were very appealing to me. And I kind of inherently am a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, so I like excitement, like just naturally. And so the emergency room sounded like the place for me, because it was the perfect blend of medicine, surgery, and that kind of high-paced environment. Maybe that's my New York upbringing. I don't know, that led me to this ability to do that. And so I was sort of innately fine with the whole ER environment. And what I started to see, obviously, and experience was the human aspect of that, and the humans coming in all sorts of states of panic and fear and distress and frustration. And, I'm not going to lie, some clients just wrecked me, it was just like blindsided me with their aggression. And I was like, whoa, I need to do something about this, and how I feel and how I show up and how I can self-regulate and just manage my own stress. And so there was a lot of deep personal work around learning how not to take on someone else's energy, and to really understand that what they're experiencing was not about me.
Yes.
And it was not about my failure or my incompetence or my lack of care or my lack of ability. It was their just at their level of all the fears and all the anger and all the frustrations that they have in the moment and with their whole life. Because, as we know, as soon as you are triggered to feel one thing in a situation, all the other times in your life that have made you feel that way come up in front of you. And even if you may not recognize it, you're just in it. And so that gets, I'm going to say vomited on the ER doctor, all of that emotion from this person. And so that was one of the reasons why I became a certified trainer for the Institute of Heart Math, because I found that I wanted to help these people.
So I want to get into that, but before we do, because you brought up dolphins, and I love dolphins too. Just jumping back into that, did you ever get to work with dolphins?
I didn't. So no. Short answer, no. I never got to work with them. I did go to SeaWorld, and I had some tours with dolphins, and I learned about what they were doing with them in the Navy, because we have a Navy, the Navy base is here in San Diego. So I met with them, and I saw how they were using dolphins in that way. But my experience with dolphins actually became natural, and I sought out places where I can go and just jump in the water and be with dolphins in the wild. And so I've done that a handful of times, and some of those have been the most profound experiences I've ever had.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, the last time I experienced them, I was in the island of Bimini in the Bahamas, and the water there is delicious. It's
crystal clear.
It's crystal clear, and it's like a bath. It's super warm, so
Oh.
it's just a nice jumping in situation.
Yeah.
And I had a snorkel, and I didn't have a diving suit. I had snorkels, but we were on a boat with a small group of people, and we were all very cetacean oriented. So we were energetically calling in pods of dolphins, and whoever showed up, we would just jump in the water. We'd stop the boat and jump in the water.
Wow.
And we had we did this for 5 days, and every day we would get at least 2 to 3 different pods that would come to our boat. And then we would just jump in and hang out with them until usually for about 45 minutes. And then they were kind of like, all right, I'm out of here.
Yeah, they're like, we have a whole ocean.
Yeah, they were like, it's nice hanging out with you guys. We're going to go now. And
oh, that's awesome.
There was this one amazing, I had a lot of amazing moments with them, but a moment was I got in the water and I could hear the clicks and the whistles of some dolphin coming to me, and he comes up to me, and he's nose to nose with me, and he was just like touching me in my nose.
Aww.
And I was like, this is intimate.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? Should I like pucker up my lips? Am I supposed to like, what's going on? And I just felt this like download of beautiful energy and love and joy. And that was love and joy was this message that this dolphin was showing me, because they're so spiritual creatures.
Yeah. So, I'm also fascinated with dolphins, and one of the things the data that I looked at on dolphins before was that the males will find buddies, and they'll like be buddies for like a decade, and they'll hang out together. And now dolphins do some wild stuff to each other and other animals that I've seen too, but I did read that they like partner up like we do as humans, and like are like best friends for life. I thought that was really cool to know. And I'm just, they're such a, I guess along the topic, they're a very conscious animal.
Very conscious animals. One cool thing about dolphins, and I know we're not really here to talk about dolphins, but one cool thing about them is that they never sleep. They never fully sleep, because they have an independent use of both hemispheres of their brains. So they could shut down one hemisphere at a time and be aware, and then shut that down and be aware. And so they sleep, but they don't sleep. So I feel like they're always in this sort of in between dream realm, and I think that's where that sort of esoteric conversation about consciousness comes in, and etherealness when it comes to dolphin energy, and whales, as well. But
yeah, I think, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk today, because just our relationship with pets, and we make supplements, and we make treats and stuff to calm pets and help with their issues. And it's like on a daily basis, I talk to pet parents, and I'm sure you've had these experiences where, sometimes we talk to pet owners, and we're talking about different issues, whatever. And a lot of times I can sense the stress levels of that person. And, when we get into this heart consciousness or intelligence, I've been really leaning into this of just like, obviously you can't come at somebody that's talking about their pet stress about their stress, but I think so often that plays such a big factor. I would even argue it probably plays a major factor. And I'm sure you could speak to that, but that's kind of where this kind of meets together is just, our relationship with our pets, and how we manage our own stress and how that relates to it. But before we get into that, again, I think there's a hesitancy when I bring this up to friends and family, especially my pet owner friends and family, about what this whole thing is. And I think there's some terms and some just categories that I wanted to like at least ask you about, so we can start a baseline, because I think when I bring this up, it sounds very woo-woo, and I love woo-woo, but I think the amount of data and science that goes hand in hand with it, I think is really important for some of these people that might be skeptical of what heart intelligence or consciousness or coherence. I think those are a lot of different words. But I think just kind of going through some of those. So just as a baseline, can you explain just really as simply as possible for caveman brain like me, what is HRV?
HRV stands for heart rate variability. And it's a way that it's an algorithm that you measure based upon your heartbeat. So in simple terms, we know that we have a beats per minute. Like when we typically, check our pulse, we'll say, okay, it's 70 beats per minute, right? And so we're counting 70 beats in 60 seconds. What heart rate variability is, it is literally the beat to beat interval between those 70 beats per minute. And the beat to beat interval, like the interval between one heartbeat and another heartbeat, is different by milliseconds, milliseconds between each beat. And they know that in studies, they like to say that the heart is not a metronome, meaning it's not this constant thing. And the more variability you have between the beats, the healthier the system is. And when there's no heart rate variability, that has been shown to increase as a predictor of increased morbidity and mortality. And so it's important to have a variability between your heartbeats. So now the question becomes, what creates the heart rate variability, right? How do you variable? And it's all connected to your autonomic nervous system. Your parasympathetic nervous system will increase your heart rate.
Okay.
Did I say parasympathetic?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's wrong. your sympathetic nervous system increases your heart rate, right? Okay. That's related to your fight or flight. Your parasympathetic nervous system decreases your heart rate, and that is your sort of rest and digest system, right? Everybody talks about your vagal nerve stimulation, polyvagal conversations, parasympathetic, up-leveling, things like that. So that's the calming system that we want. But our hearts are constantly in communication with our nervous system.
Yes.
Right? So the sympathetic nervous system will speed it up and parasympathetic will speed it down. And so that's the variability that you're seeing as this constant dance between the two energies of the autonomic nervous system.
So just to back up, the autonomic nervous system is our parasympathetic and our sympathetic. So fight or flight, and then our rest and digest, as you said. Okay.
Correct. And in the center of that is your central nervous system.
Okay.
Which is your brain and your spinal cord.
Okay. And how do we affect, what are some factors that affect our heart rate variability, whether good or bad?
Well, to put it simply, your thoughts and your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the physiology around that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're running a marathon, or we'll say you're sprinting. If you're sprinting or doing exercise or CrossFit or something, your heart rate's going to go up, right? Yep. Because there's a demand to the physiology. Your muscles are working harder. They need more blood flow. They need more oxygen. The heart's going to pump it. You're going to breathe harder, right? That's just the natural thing. But when you're sitting in a state of stillness and you're thinking about all the things that stress you out, that's what's going to happen in your physiology. Your heart rate is going to go up. The blood is going to flow to muscles that don't really need it because you're not doing anything except sitting there.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start having all this other stuff happening. You may get like flushing, the blood is flowing to places that aren't really utilizing it. So maybe your face gets all hot and red because you're nervous, and then you start sweating.
Yeah.
And then your gut starts moving and all sorts of things are happening because you're not doing anything. Your body's not moving, but your heart is in a state of sympathetic overdrive because you're thinking about things that worry you.
Yeah, it sounds like me right before bed, right when I'm starting to relax. Sometimes it's not all the time, but every now and then I'll get to bed and I'll be like, all right, let's think about everything I've done wrong and all the things I could do to correct it. So Oh, yeah. HRV is really interesting to me, and it's being explored a lot in sports and like flow state and stuff like that, and how it's measured. And it's always tricky to understand how to improve it because everybody's so different. And I think there's like a very individual aspect to it. Would you agree?
Yeah, except, in the conversation of a balanced physiology, there is a word that gets sort of wrapped into heart rate variability, and that's coherence.
Mm,
And a lot of people get that confused
yes.
with heart rate variability and coherence. And they say, well, can you be in coherence and have no heart rate variability? It's like, it's not a direct linear relationship. But what coherence is a measurement of the pattern of heart rate variability. So you can have heart rate variability when it's measured on a machine that looks very chaotic.
Yes.
There's a lot of variability. It can look like a bunch of distorted waves and up and down, up and down. Then you can have heart rate variability that looks like a really smooth flowing sine wave, like an ocean rolling, right? Yeah. And that's the pattern that you want to achieve. You want to achieve that smooth rhythmic pattern. And the way that you get that is through emotions. Mm. So when HeartMath did these studies and hooked people up to the monitors and had them feel a certain way, like they said, okay, think of something that created frustration in your life. And so they thought of something that was really frustrating. And then they measured the wave pattern of the HRV wave pattern, and you could see it's all chaotic.
Yes.
Then they said, okay, I want you to go into a state of coherence and think about something that you really appreciate and love and care for. And then when they got into that state, the pattern became very smooth and regulated. And it's only in this state where your physiology is going to change for the better.
So yeah, there's so many ways we can go with that. So the example I think of is, do you know what the assault bike is? It's the one where you use your arms too.
Oh, okay.
And so there's these things called, they call it Tabata. It's a workout. Basically, you go really hard for 10 seconds and then you take 20 seconds off. You do that for about 5 to 7 minutes and you're like dead. But I have a polar strap, and it measures your heart rate variability. And like you said, when you're doing it, your heart rate variability is chaotic. But then if you're in shape, what it shows afterwards is that it does start to smooth out almost. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my thought is, you do this really hard, intense workout for this short period, and then you're in this kind of euphoric state and you feel good and you like appreciate that the sun's out, and, like you just like naturally put yourself in that. And maybe that's more of like a extreme example, but does that sound about right?
Oh yeah, I can see that happening. I mean, usually when I think about going into coherence, I do it more of a mindfulness sort of stillness moment, but I know that would work as well. Like if you're in that state, because I've done a lot of, high intensity training classes, and I'm doing all these things with my body, and some of the, at the end of the workout, laying flat on the ground, just in complete bliss and stillness, and just having appreciation for the fact that, one, I'm not moving anymore. Yeah. and you're in this state of bliss. Your body is just, it feels so good. Yes. And it feels so, like you said, you have all these endorphins that are being secreted and all these cannabinoids that are being secreted. Yeah. Right. And the oxytocin and anandamide and all of these beautiful chemicals are just flooded in your system. You feel that way. Your body feels that way. So if you hooked yourself up to a monitor, I'm sure there has to be a smooth wave like that. And I know that I'm sure there are studies out there as well. I don't know them offhand.
Yeah. I think about for me, I'm sure I can get better at it, but like from a meditation standpoint and just sitting still and those kind of things, I've always had a hard time, but exercise has been like my supplement to that. Because I think exercise is the best way that you can kind of force that, where it's like you're really like, you know, intensifying that scenario where it's chaotic, and then the byproduct of that is just a euphoric state and more of a just like relaxed, and I shouldn't say relaxed, a more coherent state to your terminology, where you're just like, all right, I'm a little bit more centered, I'm a little bit more focused, and I can be in a better state to handle the stresses of the day.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but you know, when I'm working out, I don't have many thoughts that go through my mind.
Exactly. Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, like there's very few of them. One, it's really about focusing on what I'm doing, what muscles I'm using, muscle recruitment for some other aspect. You know,
Yes.
like if I'm in a plank and one muscle's getting fatigued, I'm like, okay, who else can I call to help me do this? You know, and then, you know, sometimes I think about, honestly, I think about pizza. You know, you know, what am I going to get to eat after?
Yeah.
But it's a very singular thought process. So I could see how it's very meditative, you know, to work out.
It's one of the reasons why I you know, was attracted to doing jujitsu so much, because it's the most present thing I've ever done in my life, where like you can't think about, oh, you know, I'm in an argument with this person, or I got to do this thing after this. It's like, I can't think about pizza. That's for sure. You have to be fully present because somebody's trying to strangle you. So
Yeah.
I love that. But then when you get done, like you're just so present still, and you just know how to be in the moment, and you know nothing can bother you, whether it's that argument or that thing you got to get done that's like really important, you know, beforehand. But then when I'm done, I'm just like, what, it's okay. So I love using that comparison. Before we get into more of this, just another baseline thing that I wanted to ask you about the heart and the heart itself. My understanding is that we have a electromagnetic frequency that, and the majority of that EMF comes from the heart. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. You know, everything in your body, every atom, every subatomic particle creates an electromagnetic field around it. You know, when a positive and a negative charge is going around itself, it creates a magnetic field. And so you're like a big ball of magnetic fields in your, you know, 70 trillion cells with, you know, gazillion atoms, right? So you're this big energetic ball, but the heart emits the strongest magnetic field from the body. It emanates that. And they've studied like how much comes out of our heads versus how much comes out of our hearts. And our head will only radiate probably a few inches out,
Yeah.
you know, when they've studied it. But they can, through a machine called a magnetometer, they can measure the magnetic field that comes out of the heart up to 6 to 9 feet out from the body.
Wow.
And it's 5,000 times stronger than the brain as it emanates. And so that's the field, and that's the toroidal field that comes out of us. You know, we have a field that through our central nervous system that comes up and down, and then comes around like a little apple with a core in the middle called a toroid. And then it will, the heart itself has its own little toroidal field, and then it just comes out like this huge thing around us.
Yeah.
And that's palpable. People know that. They know it's palpable.
So the example I always use when I'm trying to explain this to one of my friends who's like, all right, what are you talking about with this hippie stuff? And what I explain is like, and you can probably have a better example, but I'm like, you ever have somebody that comes in the room and you just like, that person kind of sucks. and that's like a bad example, but it's like, there's just an energy about them that you're like, ugh. And then on the flip side, I'm like, there's some people that you just like gravitate to, and you're like, I want to be around that person, and they're just so magnetic.
Yeah.
So is that a good way to explain that? I'm just like, because every time I talk to somebody about this, I'm like, the science and stuff behind this is like real, and it's so exciting, but I want to give them like really simple examples of how this actually is, you know, applied in our daily lives.
Yeah, well, it's like good vibes, bad vibes. People feel each other's energy when you walk in a room and you're interfacing with, two people who just had an argument, but right, but they're quiet. You walk in, you're like,
Ooh.
should I leave and come
Yeah.
back? And nothing's happening. They're just standing there, right? And you feel that. So the energy it's a subtle phenomenon that we always feel, but we're not really trained to notice it, yeah, I mean, to prove certain resonance to people that things in vibration resonate with each other. A couple examples I like to use is like you have, say, two guitars that are next to each other,
Mhm.
and you pluck the A string on one of them, the A string on the other one is going to start to vibrate
Mm.
because it's the same frequency as the one you just plucked. And then as this one is vibrating, it's gonna go back to the original one, and it's gonna create more of a movement in that one. So it's a back and forth vibrational link between them, and that's resonance. That's when you know something's like, vibing. Like when you meet that person, that you all of a sudden you meet them and you're like, there's something about them. I know them.
Yeah.
Something you recognize, but you've never met them before. But yet there's a knowing. There's a
Yes.
deep resonance. There's something that you guys are energetically connected with.
Do you,
Um,
do you think some people are just much more in touch with this coherence concept, or I think some
not.
people, oh yeah, go ahead.
I think. I think everybody. We all have the ability because we're
Okay.
all human and we're all energy. Everybody has the ability to do any of this.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not you're paying attention to it,
Okay.
and you're feeling it because we're, like I said, we're not raised to feel subtle energies. When
Yeah.
we were kids, we were, we all had imaginary friends, and
Yeah.
we all saw things that no one else could. Like we saw things that our parents said weren't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they said it wasn't true. I was like, oh, it's your imagination. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something more to that. Maybe we're seeing all these other realms. I mean, there's a whole energetic world that we call the clairs. When you're clairvoyant, right?
Oh, okay.
Clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, right? All of these things, and people who can see auras, right? They could see energy fields around you. Those people who are animal communicators.
Yeah.
People that have more telepathic abilities and a knowing. I mean, that's nothing more than just tapping in to these unseen energies and frequencies that are there. It's not mystical or magical. It's just these subtle fields that you can train yourself to look at and be aware of.
So I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's like we can all do this. I lean towards, like, I think some people are just more, they catch on to it quicker, or they train themselves more early on, or they notice it more early on, to the point where they know how to use it to their benefit and to others' benefit. And the example I think of, and again, this, I could be totally off on this, but I got dragged to, and it's so silly, but I got dragged to this Tony Robbins thing one time. And you think of Tony Robbins, motivational speakers, it's going to be this like rah kind of goofy thing. And as soon as he started talking, I just like can feel the energy, and like everything he said had a ton of value and resonated with me in such a way. And I was blown away. And I was like, he is a hypnotist, but I was like hypnotized during it. And I was like, this is crazy. I was like, now I get it. Because if you watch it on TV or you hear somebody else kind of like do his spiel, it's not quite as impactful. But when you're in it, you're like, oh, now I get it. And now I see the value. And like the notes I took from that, I still use a lot of them. So I don't know if that kind of relates to this, but that's what I was thinking of.
I think so, because everybody's spiritual awakening or spiritual journey, because I think we're all born into that naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But as we get older and we get influenced by our parents, the indoctrination of schools,
Yeah.
right? The learning, the authoritative figures, the religion, all of the things come into play that creates our belief system, and then that creates our reality of how we experience our lives, right? And so a lot of these sort of subtle things, these energetic things that we normally could tap into, like a collective consciousness,
Yeah.
it gets written off as esoteric kind of woo stuff, but it's not. And when you're in front of a motivational speaker, everyone has their own person, right? That they have listened to, that resonate with them, that they're like, oh, now I get it. Like we've been to so many different speakers and never really landed right.
Right.
All of a sudden you heard Tony Robbins say basically the same thing everybody else was saying, right?
Exactly.
But in a different way, in his way. And then it just clicked. And you're like, oh, I get it. And that what made me become a lot more tolerant of the human condition, and the human journey, because everybody is on their own path and their own journey. And I probably fell into the same thing where I'm reading about I don't know, when I was studying quantum entanglement, per se, and I'm reading about it. I'm not quite understanding it. I'm researching it. I'm listening to YouTubes. And then there was this one person that talked about it in his way, and I was like, oh, now I get it. That's really, I get it. And it's probably the priming of all this other information and the way it was presented to me. But there was a moment in time where it was like, now I get it. And then my goal was to explain it to people as if they were like a kindergartner, simply put, like, let's explain this.
Right. And I think that kind of leads us into kind of how this factors into our relationship with pets, and how we have such a bigger impact than that we don't even realize on their emotional state, their mood, and how we interact with them. And where I really felt this was particularly with pets as they were older and they were going through a lot of different health issues, and how my emotional state either helped or maybe set them back. And so when we talk about our coherence with our pets and stuff, let's start, like, what does that mean? If we are interacting with another being, and we can take pets out of it, but I like to keep it in the pet world because that's our lives. But interacting with another being, how do we become more coherent?
So the act of coherence always starts with you, right? It starts with your individual self, and it is literally a heart-brain harmony. So the two organs in our bodies that are responsible for us going into coherence is our heart and our brain. I guess simply put, when the heart and the brain are speaking the same language, then you're coherent. But how do you do that?
Yeah.
Right. So, and what's that language? The language is the language of the heart. So that means our heart is, the heart over ages and ages of, ancient wisdom traditions, and indigenous cultures, the heart has always been known as the seat of wisdom, right? The thing that you tap into and you connect to, all of that is greater than you comes from your heart, right? It's a unified conversation. It's like it's a one energetic thing. And the deep emotion or frequency of the heart is love, right? I mean, we don't say I brain you. You always say I heart you. Well, that's what we do.
To that point, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you brought up something that I really wanted to ask you about. People don't think about the heart as having intelligence, but that is the topic of today for the most part. It's like, what can you give us a little bit about the intelligence of the heart and what that means, and how the heart actually influences the brain more than vice versa?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, right.
But structurally, the heart has a little brain in it. It has about 40,000 neurons that are at the top of the heart that are very related, closely related to the vessels and the nervous system. And it is known that the heart has its own brain. They call it a heart brain. And it allows it to be self-regulatory. It also allows it to hold memory, which is fascinating. And one of the studies that have really illuminated how a heart can have memory, and this just blew my mind when I heard about it. It had to do with heart transplants. And there was an 8-year-old girl who had a heart transplant. Have you heard this story about her?
No, but I love these stories.
She had a heart transplant, and after her transplant, she started having these night terrors. And they were these horrible dreams about being chased by someone and then being murdered. She kept having these visions, and she would wake up and she would cry and scream, and she would tell her mom. She's like, she would explain to her what she was experiencing. And after a while, her mom was sort of getting the impression that there was more than just a dream. It was almost like a memory.
Yeah.
And so they typically don't tell you where you get the heart from, like who the donor is. But her mom found out that the heart came from a child who got murdered.
Oh my gosh.
And this girl who now had that heart in her body had these visions of the murder, so much that they took her to a criminal lab and the police, and they did a sketch of the man from her dreams, and they actually caught the man.
Wow.
They found the murderer of this child because this girl was having visions with her in her body.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. And, that's one story of many, many stories of people who are recipients of heart transplants that can all of a sudden speak a new language, or they can play an instrument, or they have cravings for certain foods that they never did before. So there is memory within the heart itself, like logistically, like it's structural. And where is that memory? I don't know. Where are memories? Memories are in this field of information. And so the heart taps in to that field, that energetic field, which we call the matrix, or the field, or the quantum field. That's where we're all tapping into when we're getting downloads and divine inspirations, or those aha moments.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from your head. It's not in your brain. Your brain is an organ. Your mind is the brain in motion, but the thoughts that come in, are coming in through this field.
And so much of that comes from the heart, those emotions that influence our brain and have us thinking at the end of the night, or our pet being, not well.
Right. Well, getting back to the whole coherence thing.
Yes.
And the conversation, your brain is 2 hemispheres. It's built in your or as an organ to have 2 separate different jobs, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And I mean, without going into deep, neurophysiology around that, the left brain is very analytical, it's structure, it's dogmatic, it's pragmatic, it's, mathematical, it's, that kind of stuff. On the right hemisphere is more abstract. It's, the painter, the singer, the dancer, the emotions, it's the more feminine aspect of your brain, and it's the yin part, and the left is the yang, male, that kind of energy. And I mean, obviously, with the duality of that, there's always back and forth, right? That's our conversations, our pros and our cons. And when there's a discourse in your body, it's because your heart wants to do one thing, but your brain is telling you to do something else. Right? It's like, I feel like I should do this, but I think this is better.
Yeah.
Right. And so when that's separate, that's discourse. And we always say that the heart knows. The heart always knows, right? And that's intuition. That's a deeper energetic thing that comes into play because it's connected to this other source of information that bypasses your brain, right? And so when you bring in that level of intuition and this kind of deeper knowing, and you pay attention to that, that's the conversation that the heart wants the brain to fall into. And so that's the coherence. When the brain now decides to speak a unified language and the hemispheres are actually connected and there's one thought, and that's the thought of the heart, then there's a deep alignment. And it's in those moments where you have these, the brain waves actually change. They shift into a more alpha state, which is more meditative, or a more theta state, which is more hypnotic, and then you can have these transcendental experiences.
Yeah. And then the thing that, or the example that I wanted you to talk about it, and because it's mind blowing and it relates to how we interact with our pets. Can you talk about the story with the boy and his dog?
Oh yeah.
And how our coherence and how our energy can affect our pets.
So when we are in a coherent state, which means that our heart and our brain are in a conversation, in your body, your systems become more harmonious and in alignment, right? So you have your endocrine system is online, your immune system, your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system is online. So your whole body is in this sort of state of harmony, right? And when that happens, you're emitting in this electromagnetic field that is around us. It's more like a carrier wave, right? It's a field. And you are emitting a frequency of this energetic state of love and care, tolerance, kindness, compassion, all of that really good stuff that has high energy is flowing out of you in that way. And it is interfacing with the fields of other people and also your animals, right? They're recipients of that field. And studies have shown that by nature of one person being in a coherent state, it can alter it can bring someone else's heart rhythms into coherence just by virtue of proximity. They don't even have to be in a coherent state. You can create that in them by your being coherent. And they've done some really cool studies to show that other person's physiology will shift into coherence if you're in it and you're radiating that out and putting that out to that field. And we do that with our animals all the time, right? And we're always interfacing with their energy fields, but we're also interfacing from a non-coherent state, which is when we are anxious or fearful or frustrated or intolerant or, all those other feelings. That's in the field as well. That's getting transmitted into their energy field and they're picking that up, right? That's how you're with somebody and you're like, they're all in arms and they're all stressed out, and just being in their presence makes you feel really stressed. You're like, oh my God, I feel so stressed. That's what that is. And in that study with the boy and the dog, in the HeartMath did a study, and there's it was a study done a long time ago.
Yeah.
Just to prove like what happens between a human and a dog. So this guy Josh and his dog were hooked up to heart rate monitors to measure their level of heart rate variability and their level of coherence, and they were put in separate rooms. And Josh went into a state of coherence, and he was thinking about his dog. And it showed that when they looked at the measurements afterwards, that the dog went into a coherent state at the same time as Josh did when he in separate rooms.
In the other room, yeah.
In the room. So it transferred like across space, the energy, because they were emotionally connected, the dog and the boy. They liked each other. So
so they couldn't see each other. There was no interaction going on.
Correct.
and they measured both the dog and the guy, Josh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they knew when Josh went into, because you could see when you go into coherence based upon the monitor, when at the time he got into coherence, the dog's heart rate variability went into the same pattern. It went into a coherent pattern. And so we know that we are connected that way. And they've done studies in horses, and horses are extremely coherent. They just have a very naturally, they have a huge heart and a huge magnetic field. And they actually help people go into coherence just by the interfacing with the horse. The horse will allow the person to heal and go into a coherent state. So it's almost like a little opposite of a healing.
Yeah, there's so many things that come to mind of just like people that are in recovery from addiction and things like that. I hear horses help with that, but then also on the something that's close to my heart is the combat veterans that get service dogs. And I just did an event recently with a bunch of veterans that are, new teams with their service dog, and the way they talk about their dogs and how connected they are and how much they help each other. I think a lot of times, because this organization rescues the dog. So there's trauma coming from the dog, and then there's trauma coming from the vet. And then they meet together, and these veterans that are like these tough guys, and, they've seen some stuff, just soften up when they talk about their dog, and they just are able to, be more social, have more of a purpose, and really benefit each other. I think it's incredible to see. And I think that speaks to everything we just talked about.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about that is that the training of going into a coherent state has augmented PTSD, because if there's actual physical changes. So PTSD, and you probably already know about this, is in your brain there's an organ called an amygdala.
Yes.
Right. And your amygdala is the structure in your brain that was set up to be hypervigilant and for pattern recognition of things like memories that are a threat for you, so that when you are approached it again, it's a protective mechanism. It says, oh, don't go there. However, in these post-traumatic stress issues, when you're constantly in a state of stress or trauma, that amygdala gets bigger. It grows because you're using it, so it gets a bigger organ. And then you go through things like amygdala hijacking, where any little thing that's not the thing is still a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you hear, say you're in war and you're all that gunshot, all those sounds, right? And as soon as you hear something like a car backfiring, that will put you back into that state of in the middle of war, because you just heard the sound.
Yeah.
The sound wasn't the war, and you're not in the war. So how do you get past that? How do you get past that amygdala hijacking in those moments? And that's learning to be in that state of coherence. Because when you're in that state of coherence, you will actually bypass the amygdala into a structure called your thalamus, which is in your brain, in the back of it, right behind it. The information will be picked up by the thalamus first, and then that will go to your neocortex, which is your thinking brain. And then you're going to say, oh, that's a car backfiring, and I'm in my home. And so it's a different reality, a different perspective on that, because your brain chemistry is different. And so there are profound physiological effects that happen when you train your body to go into that coherent state. Things shift. And dogs help that.
I was just going to say, I unequivocally, I've watched it. So the example I would give, I have a couple examples and I'll get through them quick. With watching these guys and their service dogs, when I see their stress levels go up, I see a lot of times their service dog will come over and just lean on them. And it's almost like the dog knows it's happening. And then the really cool ones are these cardiac service dogs, where they can sense a cardiac event or somebody who has epileptic seizures. They are trained to literally sense that. And it's incredible that they can do that. And a lot of times I've seen a lot of, including my own dad, the dog kind of immediately address that with just like putting their head on them or just like start licking them real quick. And it's incredible to watch. And then the other example is my own example of, I was with my dad and his service dog, and his service dog is fairly new. They're a new team because he retired his other service dog. And I'm in the car with my dad, and, I feel fine. I feel pretty, relaxed or whatever. But it's one of those days where my mind's racing. I have a lot of things on my mind. There's this going on. I got to get this done, blah, 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 blah. And I'm in the car and I'm not saying anything. And I just feel the dog put his head on me over and over in the car. She's putting her head on me over and over. And I'm like, why are you doing this to me? I was like, do it to him. He's the crazy guy in the car right now. And I didn't think about it right away in the moment because my mind was racing. But then I thought about the next day, and it was like, oh, she was telling me, hey, I could feel you going a million miles an hour in your head, even though you're outwardly kind of fine. I think she was trying to tell me like, hey, it's okay. You don't need to have all these things on your brain right now. So that's what comes to mind with how intuitive dogs are. But for right now, during June and July, we see it's like the highest stress time of year for cats and dogs, that are living in the home because of thunderstorms and fireworks. Is there a way, as the guardians of these animals, that we can better help their stress levels with our energy or our coherence, that are, free and simple ways? I mean, obviously we make products that help with that could be tools, but I think, our own energy can really benefit them when they start hearing the loud booms like you spoke of. And they're like, the example I always give is like, I hear these pet owners, they'll come up to me and they go, my dog never had a problem with fireworks until last year. All of a sudden they started bothering him. It's like, well, dogs are stoic. They can naturally just hide that for a certain period. But over time, as we get older, like us, it's like, I can't hold this in anymore. This is a traumatic experience, and I have to express that.
Right. Well, gosh, that was a beautiful story about that dog that you shared. And it made me think about what a cool opportunity when like you're in, or these service, people are in these states, and the dog comes over and leans on you or licks you or loves on you or gives you a reminder to like, I'm here for you. Right. Or to sort of try to balance out that energy at that moment, for you to go into a state of coherence in that moment. And then how incredibly powerful would that be? Because now you have the support of another entity, like another heartbeat. Yeah. The support of that animal is trying to put you into a coherent state. Now, all of a sudden you decide to do that. So now the two of you are in that state together. And what's super cool about the energetics of coherence is that the stronger the emotion, the higher the amplitude of the frequency of the coherence. And, it's like, I mean, think back at some moment in your life where your mind was just blown and you felt nothing but this amazing elation, like out of your mind, like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Yeah. Right. Everyone even if it's one moment in someone's life, you have that moment. Right. There's always that one moment that just blew you away, that you could have been hit by a car and you didn't even care. You'd be like in such an amazing space. You'd be like, nothing can untouchable because you're, whether you're in love or you were just in intense awe or something, like some memory that just drove you in this state of like complete exhilaration, magnificence, just joy, unbridled, right? So that's the memory or the moment to recall. I always tell people when you're going into a state of coherence, there are two things that are important in that. It's breathing and feeling, right? It's focused breathing and feeling. And that is going to drive the physiology into this coherent state. And when you are in such a state of bliss. Like you said, everyone around you is going to feel it. They gravitate towards that person. And that person doesn't have to do anything except by nature of its being. People just want to be around that person, right? And so your animals feel the same way. They want to be around that person.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's how, when you have an animal that's anxious or stressed out, the best thing for you to do is to sit down in a space and go into that coherent state, and then just radiate that out, that energy field out. And that's gonna be like a lighthouse beacon of calm and love and safety and tolerance and acceptance. So you will see that your animal is going to come to you. I can't tell you how many people that I speak to say, like, oh yeah, when I'm meditating, all of a sudden the animals are all around me. You know, the cats are on my lap, the dog is next to me, and they're all just sort of there because they love it. They love that. So I think that is that's the way to do it. You know, energetically, that's the way to do it.
So when you say, just from like a practical standpoint, could we sit with our pet and just do some like basic box breathing, kind of like 5 in, 5 out, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, and kind of think about that really profound moment in our life that was very impactful and puts us in touch with that feeling that we had of love or kindness or appreciation or gratitude or whatever the feeling is that is positive, and do that box breathing? Would that be a good kind of practice?
Yeah, you basically described the heart coherence practice right there. You know,
Okay.
you know, I didn't even have to tell you that. You just, right, you may have just intuitively known that. But basically, you always start off with breathing, right? When you're in a stressful state, you always start off with breathing, focusing on your breath, and you focus your attention into the area of your heart. And a lot of people, you just put a hand on your heart, because where you touch your body is where your attention goes.
Yeah.
You know, like if I had my hands on my knees, I'm thinking about my knees, you know, and so you put your hand on your heart. And so now your focus is on your heart space. It just helps you do that. And then you breathe in and out, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, in that rhythmic way. And what that actually does physiologically, it causes you to breathe 6 breaths in a minute, right? And automatically your sympathetic system dials down, your parasympathetic system comes up. You're amplifying your parasympathetic by breathing that slow. And you'll even notice that the more deeper you go into your respirations, I mean, even if you breathe twice in a minute, then you get like a really deep state. But most people feel pretty comfortable breathing in about 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And then do that for, a couple of minutes. And then recall that memory and feel it as if it was happening 100% again. What did it smell like? What did it sound like? What did it look like? What did it feel like? Experience all of those feels, because your body does not know the difference between an actual experience and a memory of an experience. Right? That's why dreams are so powerful. That's why people have so impacted by dreams, because you don't know the difference between that. So if I'm thinking about, the day that I was skiing on top of the French Alps, and it was cold and the wind was blowing and it was white snow, and I'm in the clouds, and I felt exhilaration, and I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. And it was amazing. And I'm skiing down and I'm swishing through the snow.
Yeah.
I mean, that is an amazing feeling of awe and pride and courage. And you also, right. And so, and your body now, with just that memory, your body is flooded with those neurochemicals that are matching that emotional state. I mean, it's physiology, right? There's a neuropeptide for every emotion that you have. And as soon as you start feeling that and thinking that, your body is flooded with those emotions and those chemicals. And so now your body is actually feeling as if it was already there. And who doesn't want to be around that?
And I think, again, when we're able to do that, our pets are so in touch with this I think innately, like I think they naturally can calm and be more resilient. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about a lot is helping them be more resilient, because the hard things aren't going away. The stresses of life, the loud booms, the mom and dad leaving for the day to go to work, whatever the stress is, they're so in touch with that.
Yeah.
And so taking a minute, a couple times a week to do this, do you think that would help?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can even make it a daily practice.
I would agree, but I'm saying, like, people get caught up, I get caught up. I'm sure you do too. But I think at minimum.
The cool thing about doing coherent training is that it literally takes 1 minute of your time.
Yeah.
Like a minute of your time. And the more you practice it, the quicker your body will go into that coherent state. And when I was in my training, I was told, well, here's a really interesting story about how I realized that this was a really good thing to do. During my training, I was every week, and I'd come home from the ER on my fourth night after working like 15-hour shifts. It was a Sunday, and I'd come home exhausted. And I had kids and my husband and I come in, for some reason on Sundays, it was chaos in the house.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was because it was before school the next day and everyone had to clean up, and I don't know. I walk into sheer chaos. And then they're fighting. Kids are fighting, yelling, right? So it's like, it was an assault on my nervous system.
Yeah.
And then I would walk into that house and I would start yelling, because I'm like, can you all just be quiet?
Yeah.
Stop fighting. And then somehow I was always the one to blame, because now mommy's yelling. And so now it's my fault. Like, something happened that made it my fault.
Yeah.
And then that just kind of shot me into a different place of like, oh my God, why are you picking on me? Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm going to learn this heart coherence stuff. And my litmus test was me going into the house on Sunday and seeing how I would feel. Right. And so I was talking about this with my coach, and she said, well, after you do this training, you're going to feel different. And I'm like, what do you mean different? Like I'm going to be apathetic and I'm just not going to care? And she said, no, you're going to feel different. And I was like, that's really interesting. Well, I'll do what you tell me to do.
Yeah.
So I can prove you wrong. Because I don't believe you.
Like, you're not walking into what I'm walking into.
Yeah, like, I don't believe you. And so she said, do this for 3 weeks. Practice for 3 weeks. They say that if you do something for 3 weeks, like, it's already a done deal. Like, you've already set it in stone. Like, it's something that you will have forever.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to practice this coherence technique for 3 weeks. And I reminded myself to do it when I was going through a threshold, like a doorway.
Yeah.
And I would take a minute, if I'm getting in my car, I would breathe for a minute, and I would recall a regenerative feeling. And I would just do that. And then I would, go out of the car, if I remembered to go when I'm going through the bathroom door, or I'm coming into the house, something like that. So I tried to do it, at least a few times a day. And then 3 weeks go by, and I'm on my way home. It's a Sunday. So I'm in the car, and I'm getting into this state. I know what I'm going to walk into. And I went into my breathing and did my coherence. I was already pretty good at it by then. And I opened the door, and everybody's fighting.
Yep.
It's the same thing. They're fighting. Their kids are yelling. Everyone's fighting. And I walked in there, and Sean, I kid you not, I felt nothing. I felt this very smooth place of calm. And I looked at them, and I just walked over to each of them quietly. I gave them all a hug, and I said, I love you, and I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
And that was it. I didn't feel that, like, that onslaught of their energy. I didn't feel triggered, like nothing. I felt just compassion and love for them. And to the point where they all stopped, and they're like, what happened to her? Yeah. And then that was it. And that's how I felt. And I was like, wow, she was right. She was absolutely right. I felt really good, you know, and I was like, wow. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this in all areas of my life, you know, and I'm going to work on all the little things that trigger me and all the little things that create a little angst in me. And then you start noticing the subtleties. You start noticing the little things that seem to upset you, you know, and then make you feel a certain way. And like, okay, well, I'm going to work on that, you know, whether it's a phone call or a conversation or an interaction, or, you know, you start unlayering the, you know, the subtle triggers in your body. And I think when people who have animals start doing that as well, you know, they're going to show up in front of their pets in a very different way.
That's exactly what I was thinking of when you were telling that story. Is if you can just make a practice before we start interacting with our pet, whether it's for something stressful or not, but kind of approaching them in that coherent state more often, I think you're going to help their overall stress levels. Not to mention your own, which is the most important, because how you show up is, you know, a big part of it with your animals. And I think if pet parents can get in that coherent state, which, like you said, only takes a minute, and then go into whatever modality, like some of the things you practice, or massage therapy, or if they're going to play some, you know, certain frequency of music or something that they can do during this, you know, thunderstorm fireworks season. I think that's so important. And I think it could really help a lot of pets be less stressed, but also on the very extreme ends of, like, we hear about pets running away so often during this time, and even getting out or even hurting themselves in the house. So it's like, if we can start creating a practice now, I think it'd be so helpful for so many pet owners. And it's free.
And it's so free, and it's so easy. It's like, you know, you have your modalities, like your thunder shirts and your, you know, calming agents and the CBD oils and the essential oils, and even, you know, pharmaceuticals like the trazodone and the Comicon, all of those things. But we always miss that icing on the cake, which is that energetic thing. And if the energy of calm is so high, right? If it's so high, it's the frequency is going to offset the frequency of the thunderstorm.
Yes.
You know, it's like the sunshine coming out to burn off the clouds that are making the rain, you know, and then the rainbow shows up.
Yeah.
You know, it's everything is this energy and frequency. And the reason why they're so scared about the thunderstorms is because they're feeling it.
Yeah.
They feel the frequencies, you know, and the sound. I mean, sound is frequency. It's audible vibration, right? But it's palpable.
Yeah.
You know, it goes through your body. You can feel it, and so you can offset that with your frequency of love and care, and, you know, and it's a palpable thing. You know, we don't think of it as a palpable thing, and if you augment all of the things that you're doing and add that energetic frequency that you're putting out into, you know, the world around your pet, it's going to just amplify all of that, you know.
I think that's the best place we can leave it, is like all the things we want to do, whether it's pharmaceutical or supplementary or, you know, acupuncture or sound therapy. When we can amplify it for free with our own energy, I think that is such a better way, because so often I've heard pet owners of, like, yeah, I'm on trazodone, like you mentioned, and I give it to them, but it doesn't work. And then once the stressful thing is done, it kicks in and they're like drunk. And it's like, well, yeah, because they were already in a heightened state. You were probably stressed out about the thing coming up.
Right.
And there was just no chance that we were able to get into this state to really help them and actually have success with whatever that modality was, or
Right.
the ability to amplify it. So,
right. I mean, think of it this way. What came to my mind is, like, say there's two people, you and someone else, and you're going to be walking across a treetop wood bridge, right? And it's scary. You're about 40 feet up in the air, and the person you're with says to you, Sean, you got this. We got this. Come, follow me. You got this. I believe in you.
Yeah.
Right? How you feel one way versus the two of you are up there and that person is leading you saying, oh, shit. This is like super scary. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if we're going to make it. This is like really scary. Maybe we should just like run across or something. Like, like what's like, you feel the difference, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to be the person in your animal's life that says, you got this. We got this. I believe in you. Let's do this. It just creates this whole other level of calm, and like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, athletes do this all the time. They do it all the time. They train these athletes with coherence techniques to also like create the moment. Imagine kicking that soccer ball into the goal. Imagine hitting that home run. Imagine shooting that basket. Live it, memorize it, have a body feel around it. And then when the time comes, you're in it.
Yeah.
We
can totally do that with our pets.
Yeah. Mental rehearsal.
Yes. It's, and again, I can't stress enough. It's free. It's something free. That we can do as a practice. It doesn't take a ton of time. They're living with us and they need us anyways. So, we might as well, improve our relationship with them.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Sands, I can't thank you enough for the time. Before I go, can you outline just really quick what the letters are after your name? Because sometimes I don't think everybody knows what a lot of these are. And then how do people get a hold of you or find more information about all the topics we talked about?
So lots of letters after my name. Yeah. So the DVM is a doctor of veterinary medicine. CVA is certified veterinary acupuncturist. The other one is the Heart Math certified trainer. And the CEP is a certified energy practitioner.
Okay.
Yeah, I got trained to do shamanic energy medicine for humans. And everything I do for humans, I do for animals. Everything I do for animals, I try to do for humans, at least where it comes to the emotional, aspect of things. And, and sound therapy. And so to get in touch with me, they could just go to my website. It's my name, drbarriesands.com, drbarriesands.com. And they can get in touch with me that way. If they want to have consultations, they can book on that. If they have some questions, they can ask questions. If I have any events, I'm going to post that on my website as well. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And hopefully we'll be in person, seeing each other soon at some point in our event circuits and all the things that we both do. But until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. It was great talking to you. I love this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.